He spoke only 6 simple words, and in that instant something deep inside me dropped. Before my mind could make sense of it, my instincts had already reacted. That feeling in your stomach often notices the truth before your thoughts do. Words have incredible power, not only because of what they mean, but because of the timing, the tone, and the way certain phrases keep showing up whenever something doesn't feel right. If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling even more confused than before it started, then this is something you need to hear. The reality is that betrayal rarely begins with a physical affair. It usually starts much earlier, in the emotional distance, the slower replies, the awkward silence, the unexplained changes, and yes, in a few carefully chosen words that become a shield. These are not random expressions, they are repeated patterns, patterns often used by someone who is hiding something. They help avoid responsibility, redirect attention, and create just enough confusion to buy more time. At first you may ignore them, but later they replay in your mind during those sleepless nights when everything suddenly starts making sense. Stay with me because what you're about to hear may completely change the way you listen to conversations. We're going to look closely at 6 phrases that appear again and again when someone is trying to cover their tracks. More importantly, we'll uncover what those words usually mean beneath the surface. You'll begin to notice how these statements connect to emotional manipulation, avoidance, and hidden motives. If you've been questioning yourself, wondering if you're imagining things or trying not to seem overly sensitive, don't click away just yet. Trust yourself enough to keep listening. Once you understand the real purpose behind these words, you'll never hear them the same way again. Many people believe cheating starts with one bad decision. In reality, the emotional separation often begins much earlier, and language is usually the first thing that changes. When someone is hiding another relationship or emotionally pulling away, their conversations become carefully managed. Their words stop creating connection and start protecting secrets. The goal is no longer complete honesty. The goal becomes self-protection. They say just enough to keep your doubts under control while quietly shifting responsibility onto you. That doesn't always mean they wake up planning to manipulate anyone. Sometimes these habits slowly develop because they work. They discover that certain phrases quickly end difficult conversations, so they repeat them whenever uncomfortable questions appear. The result is the same. You leave feeling uncertain while they avoid giving real answers. Think about how often someone says, "You're making this bigger than it is." Suddenly, the discussion is no longer about suspicious behavior. Now it's about your reaction. The attention moves away from what they did and lands entirely on how you responded. That's not an accident. It's a powerful way to redirect the conversation without ever addressing the real issue. You may also hear things like, "It means nothing. You're reading too much into it. Well, why can't you trust me?" Notice the pattern. Each sentence quietly places the burden back onto you. Instead of explaining strange behavior, they make you defend your feelings. Before long, you begin questioning your own judgment instead of questioning theirs. Here's what many people miss. These phrases aren't always rehearsed. After enough repetition, they become automatic. The person learns that a few familiar words can stop confrontation before it grows. Over time, this conditions you to ignore your instincts and silence your own concerns. That's why recognizing these patterns matters so much. This isn't only about exposing dishonesty. It's about protecting your confidence and keeping your ability to trust your own observations. Someone who genuinely cares about you wants to bring peace, not confusion. They answer questions with openness instead of creating more doubt. If every conversation leaves you feeling smaller, uncertain, or afraid to speak up, pay attention. Your feelings may be telling you something important. And the very first phrase worth noticing sounds harmless, but it carries far more weight than most people realize. One phrase that deserves your full attention is, "You're overthinking it." On the surface, it can sound gentle. It may even seem like they're trying to comfort you or calm your worries. But slow down and really listen to what is happening underneath those words. Very often, this sentence isn't meant to reassure you. It's meant to stop your thinking before it reaches uncomfortable conclusions. When someone repeatedly says you're overthinking, they may actually be saying, "Please stop asking questions." They want your thoughts to end before they connect all the small details you've been noticing. This phrase quietly challenges your confidence in your own instincts. It suggests that your observations are exaggerated, your concerns are unreasonable, and your intuition can't be trusted. The more often you hear it, the easier it becomes to believe that maybe you really are imagining everything. That is exactly why it can be so effective. Instead of examining their behavior, you begin examining yourself. Instead of asking whether their actions make sense, you start wondering whether your emotions are the real problem. Have you ever caught yourself apologizing after bringing up something that genuinely bothered you? If so, think carefully about how the conversation changed direction. Did your questions get answered, or did the focus suddenly become your personality, your emotions, or your supposed tendency to worry too much? That's the difference between reassurance and dismissal. A caring partner helps you understand. Someone hiding the truth often tries to make you stop looking altogether. Keep watching, because the next phrase is even more subtle, and millions of people hear it without realizing how much power it holds until it's already changing the way they think. Here's your rewritten version with the same overall length, no headings, simple English, a fresh flow, and strong YouTube retention pacing. After hearing those words enough times, something begins to change inside you. You start asking yourself difficult questions. Am I too emotional? Am I making problems out of nothing? Maybe I'm misunderstanding everything. And that is exactly where someone who is hiding the truth wants you to end up. A person who is cheating, or someone who has emotionally disconnected from the relationship, usually doesn't want honest conversations. They want everything to look calm on the outside, while avoiding what is really happening underneath. So when the facts stop matching the stories, when small details begin changing, when attention slowly fades, or when their behavior suddenly feels different, they often reach for one familiar sentence: "You're overthinking." It sounds harmless, but it quietly shuts down the conversation before it reaches uncomfortable questions. Instead of explaining why things feel different, they make you question why you noticed in the first place. Think about that for a moment. If someone truly had nothing to hide, wouldn't they want to clear things up instead of making you feel embarrassed for asking? Wouldn't they answer your concerns instead of dismissing them? Stay with me, because this is where many people miss the warning signs. Someone who genuinely values your peace of mind doesn't punish you for wanting clarity. They don't make you feel guilty for seeking honesty. Instead, they listen, explain, and work through the confusion with you. But when this phrase keeps showing up, it becomes more than a sentence. It becomes protection for them and pressure on you. Little by little, it weakens your confidence until you begin ignoring your own instincts and making excuses for behavior that once would have bothered you. Even when the signs are sitting right in front of you, you convince yourself to look away because you've been taught to doubt your own judgment instead of trusting it. Here's something important that many people forget. Most women are not constantly overthinking. More often, they are noticing patterns. There is a huge difference between fear that comes from imagination and instincts that grow from repeated experiences. Intuition doesn't appear out of nowhere. It develops from small changes that keep repeating. It notices the missing warmth, the delayed replies, the emotional distance that words can no longer cover. You are not unreasonable because you noticed he suddenly protects his phone in ways he never did before. You are not imagining things because his energy feels different even while he's sitting beside you. And you are certainly not overreacting when something feels wrong and every attempt to talk about it gets pushed aside. That familiar phrase isn't solving anything. It's redirecting your attention away from the real issue. Once you recognize it for what it really is, a way to avoid difficult conversations rather than resolve them, everything starts looking different. You stop apologizing for your questions. You stop feeling guilty for wanting honest answers. And most importantly, you begin trusting yourself again. Keep watching, because the next phrase sounds caring on the surface, yet it often hides something completely different underneath. Many people hear it and think it's kindness, but the real message can be much darker than it first appears. Another phrase worth paying close attention to is, "I just want you to be happy." At first, it sounds thoughtful, it sounds loving. It almost feels like something a caring partner would naturally say, but timing changes everything. When those words appear during an argument, or right after you've raised serious concerns about the relationship, they can become one of the smoothest ways to avoid responsibility. Instead of answering your questions, the conversation suddenly shifts toward your feelings. It sounds generous, but often it quietly says, "Your emotions belong to you. I'm stepping away from this." Notice what happens. You ask about strange behavior, mixed signals, or emotional distance. Rather than explaining those things, he starts talking about your happiness instead. It feels comforting for a moment, yet nothing actually gets answered. That's the key difference. Real conversations solve problems. Empty phrases simply move around them. In many situations, this sentence appears just before someone begins pulling away emotionally. It's a gentle-looking exit that allows them to avoid difficult truths while appearing thoughtful and mature. From the outside, it almost sounds noble, but underneath, it can simply be another way to escape accountability. Here's something to think about. If you keep asking questions, you risk being labeled impossible to satisfy. If you stop asking, the uncomfortable discussion disappears completely. Either way, the truth never gets addressed. That's why this tactic works so well, especially on people who naturally want to believe the best in others. Real love doesn't only wish happiness with words. It creates happiness through honesty, consistency, and open communication. Beautiful sentences mean very little if actions tell a different story. Sometimes this phrase appears because guilt is quietly growing inside the other person. Deep down, they know something isn't right. They know the distance is real. They know the relationship has changed. Yet instead of admitting any of that, they gently move the emotional spotlight onto you. Suddenly the conversation is no longer about their choices. It's about what you deserve, what you want, or what would supposedly make you happier. In one smooth move, your original questions disappear. Your hurt gets pushed aside. Your search for answers quietly fades into the background. The next time someone tells you, "I just want you to be happy," don't only listen to those words. Listen to everything missing around them. Are they honestly trying to understand your concerns, or are they trying to end the discussion before it reaches the truth? Because genuine love never hides behind comforting sentences while avoiding honest conversations. Now we're moving into the third phrase, and this one changes everything. If you've ever walked away from an argument wondering whether your own memory could be trusted, pay very close attention. What comes next has left countless people doubting themselves without even realizing it. The third phrase is simple, but it can be incredibly damaging. That never happened. Few sentences create more confusion than these four words, because this is where dishonesty becomes something much deeper than lying. This is where someone begins attacking your confidence in your own reality. When a person calmly says, "That never happened," they aren't only denying an event, they are denying your experience. They are attempting to replace your memory with theirs. If they repeat it enough times with complete confidence, you may eventually stop trusting what you clearly remember. That is exactly how gaslighting works. It doesn't simply hide the truth. It slowly changes your relationship with your own mind. It makes you wonder whether conversations happened the way you remember them. It makes you question emotions that once felt completely valid. Little by little, your confidence disappears while their version of events becomes the only one allowed. Imagine how exhausting that becomes. The words they spoke yesterday suddenly never existed. The promises they made somehow vanish. The moments that hurt you are dismissed as misunderstandings or imagination. Over time, this creates emotional confusion that is incredibly difficult to escape. Keep watching, because the next phrase reveals another layer of manipulation, and once you recognize it, you'll begin seeing patterns that were hidden in plain sight all along. Here's the rewritten continuation following all of your requested rules. Same overall length, simple English, fresh wording, no headings, no blank lines, paragraph-only format, around 1,500 characters per paragraph, and with YouTube-style retention throughout. Imagine this. You ask him about a flirty message you noticed, a conversation you clearly remember, or a comment that crossed the line. Instead of explaining himself, he looks at you and calmly says, "That never happened." No real discussion, no honest answer, just complete denial. In that moment, the conversation changes direction. Instead of looking at his behavior, you begin questioning your own memory. Did I misunderstand? Am I remembering it wrong? Maybe I'm being too emotional. But deep inside, something still tells you what you saw was real. That's why this phrase is so dangerous. It doesn't simply reject your concern. It quietly turns you into the one who feels guilty while allowing him to walk away without taking responsibility. Over time, this can slowly wear down your confidence. Many people trapped in emotionally unhealthy relationships describe feeling like they are losing trust in themselves. They begin checking every memory, replaying every conversation, wondering if their own mind can still be trusted. Think about how exhausting that becomes. The person who should make you feel safe becomes the very reason you question your own reality. Stay with me, because this pattern becomes even clearer as we continue. Someone who truly values you doesn't erase your experiences just because they are uncomfortable. A healthy partner might say, I remember it differently. Let's talk about it. That's completely different from shutting the conversation down with complete denial. If you find yourself keeping screenshots, writing notes, or collecting proof just to convince yourself that you're not imagining things, pause for a moment. Ask yourself why you feel the need to become your own detective. Relationships should be built on trust, not evidence folders. When someone keeps changing your reality to protect themselves, confusion becomes the tool they use to stay in control. And that is one of the biggest warning signs you should never ignore. Now let's move to another phrase that sounds emotional on the surface, but often hides something very different underneath. The words are, I can't do anything right. At first they almost sound honest. Maybe he's disappointed in himself. Maybe he feels guilty. Maybe he's finally opening up. But listen closely, because this sentence often has a completely different purpose. Instead of taking responsibility, it quietly moves all the attention onto his emotions. Picture the situation. You bring up his cold behavior, strange messages, broken promises, or growing distance. Instead of responding to what you actually said, he sighs and says, I can't do anything right. Suddenly, everything changes. The conversation is no longer about the issue you raised. Now it's about comforting him. Without even realizing it, you begin reassuring him. That's not what I meant. You're not a terrible person. I'm not attacking you. Before long, your original concern has disappeared completely. That's why this tactic works so well. It transforms accountability into sympathy, and if someone is hiding something, this emotional shift becomes incredibly useful. As long as they appear hurt, misunderstood, or defeated, you're less likely to continue asking difficult questions. Most caring people don't enjoy making someone else feel bad. That's exactly what makes this phrase so effective. It quietly uses your kindness against you. Keep watching, because the next phrase is even more common, and once you recognize the pattern, you'll hear it differently every single time. People who rely on this sentence often understand exactly how powerful self-pity can be. Instead of facing the consequences of their choices, they present themselves as the real victim. The message underneath becomes, I'm trying my best and nothing I do is enough. Suddenly you're no longer discussing honesty or trust. You're defending yourself against accusations you never made. If you're naturally supportive, patient, or always looking for the good in others, this situation becomes even harder. Your first instinct is to comfort, encourage, and help them feel better. But ask yourself something important. Did the real issue actually get solved, or did it simply disappear beneath their emotions? There is a huge difference between genuine regret and emotional distraction. Someone who truly feels sorry doesn't avoid the conversation. They lean into it, they admit mistakes, they answer difficult questions, they don't replace accountability with guilt. So the next time you hear I can't do anything right, don't rush to rescue them. Pause for a second, look beyond the words. Is this an honest expression of regret, or is it quietly changing the subject? Healthy relationships leave room for both people to share pain while also taking responsibility for their actions. One person's emotions should never erase the other person's concerns. That's an important difference many people only realize much later. And the next phrase may seem completely harmless, yet it often becomes another powerful way to avoid uncomfortable truths. The fifth phrase sounds simple enough. Can we not do this right now? At first, it may seem perfectly reasonable. Everyone needs space sometimes. Everyone has stressful days. But pay attention to how often those words appear. If every serious conversation gets pushed into the future, then the problem is no longer bad timing. The problem is avoidance. There is a healthy difference between asking for a short break to calm down and repeatedly using delay as an escape. When someone constantly responds with, can we not do this right now? What they may really be saying is, I don't want to deal with this. It's a way of stopping the conversation without actually solving anything. And when someone is hiding emotional distance, secret conversations, or behavior they know would hurt you, delaying becomes one of the easiest strategies available. Every delay gives them more time to prepare another explanation, more time to avoid difficult questions, more time to regain control of the situation. Meanwhile, you're left waiting, wondering, replaying the conversation in your head. If you push harder, you risk being called dramatic or impatient. If you stay quiet, nothing ever changes. That's exactly how this pattern keeps repeating. Real love doesn't avoid difficult conversations forever. It may ask for a little time, but it always comes back ready to talk. So when you hear, can we not do this right now, don't only notice the words, watch what happens afterward. Does the conversation ever return, or does it quietly disappear? The answer to that question often reveals far more than the sentence itself ever could. Here's the rewritten continuation following your requested style and preserving the overall volume. Before long, you begin questioning everything about yourself, instead of questioning the situation. Maybe I picked the wrong time. Maybe I sounded too emotional. Maybe I should have waited until he was in a better mood. Those thoughts slowly become normal. But here's something important to remember. When someone refuses to be accountable, there is almost never a perfect time. Somehow they're always exhausted, busy, under pressure, distracted, or simply not ready to talk. The conversation keeps getting pushed further away until your concerns no longer have a place in the relationship. Little by little, your voice becomes quieter while their excuses become louder. Keep watching, because this is where many people lose themselves without even realizing it. Every time the discussion is delayed, your questions remain unanswered. The same problems return again and again, but nothing is ever solved. That endless cycle creates emotional exhaustion. You keep hoping the next conversation will finally bring understanding, but instead you find yourself standing in the exact same place. That isn't always random. Sometimes confusion becomes a way to stay in control. A person who truly values the relationship doesn't avoid every difficult conversation. They may honestly say, I need a little time to calm down, or can we talk after dinner? That's healthy because there is a clear promise to come back and finish the conversation. But when can we not do this right now becomes the automatic response every single time you get close to uncomfortable truths, it stops being about timing, it becomes about escape. Notice the pattern, because patterns often tell a much bigger story than words ever can. The timing of this phrase also says a lot. It often appears right after you point out something that doesn't make sense. Maybe you noticed a lie. Maybe you asked about strange behavior. Maybe you confronted them with facts they couldn't easily explain. Instead of giving an answer, they simply want the conversation to end as quickly as possible. There is no explanation, no real discussion, just another request to stop talking. Silence can be comforting when two people need space, but silence can also protect secrets when someone doesn't want the truth to come out. That's why actions after the pause matter much more than the pause itself. Do they return ready to talk, or does the subject quietly disappear forever? That answer reveals more than the original sentence ever could. You deserve someone who doesn't run from uncomfortable moments. You deserve someone willing to step into the difficult conversations because they understand that's where trust grows. Healthy relationships are not built by avoiding conflict. They are strengthened by working through it together. A caring partner may need a short break, but they always come back because the relationship matters more than temporary discomfort. So the next time you hear, "Can we not do this right now?" don't only focus on the words. Watch what follows. Are they protecting the connection between you, or are they simply protecting themselves? Stay with me, because the final phrase may sound emotional, even loving, but it often hides one of the biggest forms of emotional avoidance. The last phrase to pay close attention to is, maybe we're just not meant to be. At first, those words sound heartbreaking. They almost feel honest, as if someone is finally accepting reality. But context changes everything. When this sentence suddenly appears in the middle of an argument, especially after you've asked difficult questions or raised concerns about trust, it often serves a completely different purpose. Instead of solving the issue, it redirects the entire conversation. Rather than explaining their actions, they introduce the possibility of losing the relationship itself. Suddenly, your attention shifts away from what brought you there in the first place. Instead of asking why they acted the way they did, you're now worried about whether the relationship is falling apart. That's exactly why this sentence can be so powerful. It creates fear instead of clarity. It isn't always a real breakup. Often it's only a possibility placed into the conversation, just enough to make you panic. It quietly tests your reaction. Will you chase? Will you apologize? Will you stop asking questions just to keep the relationship alive? Keep listening, because this emotional shift happens faster than most people realize. The focus moves away from accountability and lands entirely on saving the connection. Meanwhile, the original problem remains untouched. That's how difficult conversations quietly disappear without ever being resolved. Think carefully about what happens next. Instead of receiving honest answers, you may find yourself reassuring them, promising to try harder, offering more patience, making compromises, or searching for ways to prove that the relationship should continue. Without noticing it, you've become responsible for fixing a problem you didn't create. That's why this phrase can be so emotionally confusing. It replaces responsibility with uncertainty.